Peace, peace, peace. This is Rakim Allah with Wazadome TV, and today I'm doing a quick bill on the history of African American thought on Palestinian subjugation. And so, pretty much, we're just going to go through the history of what our prominent Black leaders have said about what's going on in Palestine. And so, I'm going to start with just giving you a brief history on what as actually happening and how it began. We won't stay there long. I mean, it's a very complex issue. There's a lot of books and research on it, but this is mainly focusing on what our response has been to it here. So, the Al-Nakba, or what's known as a disaster or catastrophe or cataclysm, is a Palestinian exodus in 1948 that occurred with more than 700,000 Palestinians were fled or expelled from their homes during the 1948 Palestine War. The exodus was a central component of the fracturing, dispossession, and displacement of Palestinian society. And there it is known as the Nakba, which is also Arabic for disaster, in which between 400 and 600 Palestinian villages were destroyed and Palestinian history erased. And so this is just the event, the original event that popped all of this off and displaced so many Palestinians. And since then, they've been striving to get their home back. And so in 48, which President Truman, what he said, and I'm just going to give you what the Europeans said first, and then I'm going to tell you what we said. And so in 48, what Harry Truman said was this. He said, this government has been informed that a Jewish state has been proclaimed in Palestine, and recognition has been requested by the provisional government thereof. The United States recognizes the provisional government as the de facto authority in the new state of Israel. So right there, he's saying that we approve of the subjugation of the Palestinians. We approve that 700,000 Palestinians have been displaced from their homeland. And we approve that the European Jew is now the authority in that land. And fast forward to 67, this is the third war between Palestine and Israel, known as the SixDay War. And that's the decisive victory from Israel that included the capture of the Sinai Peninsula, Gaza Strip, West Bank, the old city of Jerusalem, and Golan Heights. And if you watch, and there's the map, so you can see for yourself where this is. But if you watch the news, these are the territories that are being fought over now to this very day. And so this is what Lyndon B. Johnson, who was the president of the time during the Third Palestine-Israeli War, says, our society is illuminated by the spiritual insights of the Hebrew prophets. America and Israel have a common love of human freedom, and they have a common faith in a democratic way of life. Most, if not all of you, have very deep ties with the land and with the people of Israel, as do I, for my Christian faith sprang from yours. The Bible stories are woven into my childhood memories, as the gallant struggle of modern Jews to be free of persecution is also woven into our souls. So there again, even from the Christian perspective, he is he is telling you that, hey, we support the Palestinian subjugation by Israel and the displacement of Palestinians. This is what the president, Lyndon B. Johnson, said. And so the Black Panther Party spoke on this, and the Black Panther Party was a supporter of Palestine and the Palestinian struggle. And in his article on the Middle East, the Black Panther Party leader, Huey P. Newton, stated, we support the Palestinians' just struggle for liberation 100%. We will go on doing this. And we would like for all progressive people of the world to join our ranks in order to make the world in which all people can live. So as we see, Huey P. Newton and the Black Panther Party were in support of Palestine and their struggle for liberation against Israel and Zionism. An appeal by Black Americans against United States support of Zionist Israel. In 1970, an appeal was published in the New York Times titled An Appeal by Black Americans Against United States Support of Zionist Government of Israel. This statement was issued by the Committee of Black Americans for Truth in the Middle East and signed by prominent Black revolutionary leaders, including James Boggs and Robert F. Williams. So this appeal was even in the New York Times, written by James Boggs and Robert Williams about the African American support of Palestinians and their subjugation by the Israeli government and Zionism. The League of Revolutionary Black Workers. One of the first workers' organizations to take up the cause of Palestinian liberation was the League of Revolutionary Black Workers based in Detroit. Black and Arab auto workers there jointly participated in wildcat strikes, and the group's solidarity with Palestine became a point of struggle with the city's ruling class. The League of Revolutionary Black Workers had transformed Wayne State University student newspaper into a radical citywide paper. But after publishing pro-Palestine articles, the administration used the false charge of anti-Semitism to launch an all-out attack on the League of Revolutionary Black Workers on the campus of Wayne State University. Now, this is a thing that they've always done. Anytime you have expressed any support of Palestine and them defending themselves, it has been labeled as anti-Semitic. And so that's just a common theme that we've seen then, and a common theme of how they interpret Palestinian support now. So SNCC, who was a civil rights group that Julian Bond and Kwame Ture back then with Stokely Carmichael was in, who did a lot of work in Alabama, Tennessee, and North Carolina. In 1967, their newsletter had an article called The Third World, The Palestine Problems. And I'm just going to give you a few of the points that it made. The first point, it says that Zionism, which is a worldwide nationalistic Jewish movement, organized, planned, and created the state of Israel by sending Jewish immigrants from Europe into Palestine to take over land, homes belonging to the Arabs. Two, that in this operation, they received maximum help, support, and encouragement from Great Britain, the United States, and other white Western colonial governments. Three, that organized Jewish Zionism dates back to 1897, when the first Zionist Congress was held. The program adopted as the Congress was to create for the program adopted at the Congress was to create for the Jewish people a home in Palestine secured by public law. Thus began the Palestine problem, which led to the present Arab-Israeli conflict. Four, Britain took control of Palestine at the end of World War I, and working hand in hand with European Zionist Jews, such as Lord Rothschild, set forth the Balfour Declaration. Thus, in 1917, Palestine became a world problem. Five, that in Balfour Declaration stated that the British government was in favor of establishing a national home for the Jewish people in Palestine, but at the same time contradicted itself and said nothing should be done to damage the civil and religious rights of the non-Jewish inhabitants of Palestine. And the Martin Luther King had a essay called The Middle East Question, where he said, at the heart of the problem are oil interests, and the American Jewish Congress has stated American policies have been motivated in no small measure by the desire to protect 2.5 billion stake in which U.S. oil companies have invested in that area. So, but although Martin Luther King had been on record with some pro-Israel sentiments, I think towards later the end, he started to understand what was really going on. Malcolm X on Palestine. He says the Zionist argument to justify Israel's present occupation of Arab Palestine has no intelligent or legal basis in history. He also says the Zionist Israel's occupation of Arab Palestine has forced the Arab world to waste billions of precious dollars on ornaments, making it impossible for these newly independent Arab nations to concentrate on strengthening the economies of their countries and elevate the living standard of their people. So this was in Newsweek, and this was what Palestinians had to say about our plight as Black people in the wilderness of North America and our struggles with oppression and police brutality. And this is an article in Newsweek. It says, as protests in Ferguson, Missouri erupted following the killing of Michael Brown Jr., organic articulations of solidarity could be seen between Palestinians in the West Bank and Black Lives Matter protesters. Palestinians tweeted at the protesters about how to avoid tear gas, advising to run towards the wind and stand close to soldiers so they can't tear gas you. Otherwise, they would get tear gas, as well as explaining how to make makeshift gas masks out of t-shirts. Black activists in Ferguson were seen chanting slogans such as "From Ferguson to Palestine, occupation is a crime," while wearing Palestinian kafiyas. An organization called Palestine Legal, which is a legal organization designed to support, Palestinians and their oppression by Israel. They, in a newsletter, said, and on their website, said, for every $20,000 we raise through July 15th, we will donate $1,500 to Law for Black Lives, National Black Food and Justice Alliance, and National Bailout to support the Black-led movement for racial justice with the goal of donating $15,000 in total. So they had a goal of donating $15,000 in total for the help and relief and to Black organizations that were dedicated to help us out. You know what I'm saying? And on their newsletter, it says it is impossible to separate recent anti-Black violence from this nation's foundation in violence against Indigenous, Black, and other people of color here throughout the globe. From the murder of George Floyd by Minneapolis police to the disproportionate and violent police response to those protesting his murder, to the sinister threat of police brutality against Christian Cooper for bird watching in a park, to the murder of Ahmaud Arbery while jogging, and the murder of thousands more whose names we cannot forget. The assault on Black lives is the unmistakable product of a white supremacy that today is on full display. And this comes from an article in a Palestinian newspaper. And there goes a Palestinian mural of George Floyd in Palestine. And so, I'm sorry, in Palestine. And so the article speaks about how George Floyd and the uprising, how Israel contributes to the militarization of American police. So they're even connecting Zionism and the subjugation of Palestinians and the militarization of their police to the militarization of our police, and how Israel contributes to that. You know what I'm saying? So it's a very nuanced subject, and I just wanted to kind of build on the history of what original men and women spoke and thought about the Palestinian subjugation by Israel and Zionism. So there's a lot of newsletters and books and articles and essays that speak on this subject. If you want to learn more about it, I hope you found this informative. Peace to the gods, the earth, and civilized people. I'm out.